Hey guys, how's it going? Today, we are going to be getting back to the Android devices and talk about another Samsung device. A device that's a fan favorite for sure. The year is 2015. Apple has released their best-selling iPhone of all time, the iPhone 6, a few months prior.
I am thrilled to show you the newest iPhones.
The competition is hot and the smartphone market is growing exponentially more than ever. It seems like Apple has left every other smartphone brand in the dust. But then, in March of 2015, Samsung announces a device that arguably changed their history forever. That's right, today we are going to be talking about the Samsung Galaxy S6. In my opinion, this was a device that really made people take Samsung seriously. I remember back in the day when this phone came out and I saw the new designs, both the Galaxy S6 but especially the S6 Edge. I was blown away and I immediately wanted one. Now, talking about the standard Samsung Galaxy S6, it's got a pretty simple design actually, not too different from the S4 and S5 that came before it, but with a glass back this time. This was the first Samsung phone to come with a glass back. The back not only has a glass back but supports wireless charging, which is so cool. This was one of the first phones by Samsung to have wireless charging. I mean, the later revisions of the S5 also had it, but it wasn't so refined, and I think the S6 line of phones is where Samsung really started pushing the wireless charging up front. Now, of course, this does mean that the removable back, like from the previous Samsung devices, is now gone. If you've seen my review on the Samsung Galaxy S4, you would know that the removable back that it has is one of the stronger points of that device. But I don't mind Samsung deciding to go with this change. I think it was one of those things that had to be done to make the phone feel more premium. I think it was one of those tactics that Samsung implemented since Apple was really running away with their premium built iPhones at the time. And this was a move that they made in a way to catch up to them. A move that looking back now seems to be the right decision. In terms of how premium this phone feels, it is pretty comfortable to hold in the hands, and I think part of the reason is that it is a small device in comparison to the sizes of phones we have today. Design-wise, this phone is beautiful. It's not as elite as its Edge counterpart, but it still holds up pretty well. If you have seen my review on the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge, you'd know that I'm a big fan of the Edge design. But I think the only thing that ages this phone a little are the top and bottom bezels, which in 2022 unfortunately does stand out among the edge-to-edge displays we get today. Now, on the front, it has a 5.1-inch Super AMOLED display. It's a 1440p panel. Now, for a 2015 device, it has an outstanding display, I must say. Believe me, I'm not exaggerating when I say how good the pixel density on this thing is, especially when you consider that it's relatively a smaller device as compared to phones these days. Overall, this panel is quality to say the least. Now, a controversial thing about this device is that Samsung removed the microSD card slot during this revision of the S series. Now, that is such a bizarre thing considering they brought it back with the S7 and S7 Edge, and now it was taken away again with the S21 line of phones from 2021 last year. I feel like this was also a move from Samsung to follow in the steps of Apple when they also removed the microSD card slot from their iPhones, but it's a good thing that Samsung stopped in their tracks in time, or we would have seen them removing the headphone jack as early as Apple did as well. Speaking of which, this phone has a headphone jack on the bottom along with a micro USB port, power button on the side, along with the volume buttons as well. Now, moving on to the cameras, it has a single camera setup at the back. It's a 16 megapixel sensor and a 5 megapixel camera at the front. This back camera can shoot 4K videos, which is so impressive for a 2015 device. The front camera can only shoot 1080p, and the selfies you'll get from this phone aren't really all that good. Now, in 2022, it's not a mind-blowing camera setup, but it still holds up pretty well even today. I mean, you can easily get decent shots under good lighting conditions from the back camera. It obviously doesn't have a multi-camera setup, which you get on almost any phone these days, but I think the photos you get from this camera just about holds up if you edit them a bit. Now, on the software side, this phone started on Android 5 and ended on Android 7. Now, Android 7 isn't terrible to use in 2022. Like, my recommendation when it comes to Android has always been to pick something up that has Android 7 or 8 minimum. So even on factory software, this phone doesn't have all that bad of a software. Now, just because it's not bad doesn't mean it's good either. This phone is completely outdated in terms of software, but the good thing about Android devices is that you can root and custom ROM and get like a more recent version of Android. So whether you decide to custom ROM it or not, I think either way, the software experience is somewhat good. Now, performance-wise, we have the Exynos 7-octa 7420 chipset inside of it with 3 gigs of RAM. Now, at the time when this phone came out, it was very snappy and fast, but in 2022, I'll be honest and say that the performance is probably the only bad thing about this device now. Now, keep in mind, if you're going to use this device for normal things, like using social media apps or watching YouTube and so on, and so you're that kind of a person, then you don't have to worry much. This phone can just about handle your needs. But the moment you want to play any big games or heavy apps, you might notice a significant drop in performance and may experience some glitching. I would recommend custom ROMing this device if you want a smoother experience. So in terms of performance, that pretty much covers it up. Now, battery wise, it's got a 2550 mAh battery. It is smaller than the battery in the S5 with 2800 mAh and even S4 which had a 2600 mAh battery, which isn't great considering they increased the resolution on the display this time around. Regardless of that, the battery life isn't all that bad, even in 2022. Now, I was expecting a lot worse, but for a casual consumer, you may find charging your phone once or twice a day. But that's also because the battery has degraded over the years, so installing a new one will definitely give you a better battery experience. Now, to summarize the question whether this phone is worth it or not, let me tell you something first. Anything before this phone is no longer worth it anymore. I'm talking about the S4s, the S5s. And this phone in particular, the S6, just about sits in the border at the moment for me. It's a phone waiting to be obsolete in my books. So its demise is inevitable. Which means in terms of longevity, it's not worth it. But coming back to the main question of whether this phone is still worth it in 2022 today, in my opinion, yes. This phone is still relevant in 2022, and if you're someone who owns one, I'll recommend custom ROMing it, and you'll be easily able to use it for like another year or so. If you don't want to custom ROM it, then I would recommend this phone with its default Android 7 software to maybe your kids or like maybe your older grandparents who needs a new phone. I mean, you can still use it for yourself, but I do believe this phone will pass its due date by next year, so keep that in mind. But for now, I think this phone still has life in it. Like I've mentioned in my previous videos, getting a S6 or S6 Edge is the minimum I would go in case you want a Samsung device on a budget. But if you are willing to spend a few extra bucks, I would recommend getting the S7 Edge. That phone is arguably the best phone Samsung ever made and still can easily be used for like 2 more years if you decide to custom ROM it, of course. If you guys are interested in watching my video on the Galaxy S7 Edge, click the link in the description below. Now, getting something like a S10, S9 or even S8 makes a whole lot more sense since those phones have one UI. But if you're really on a tight budget, then getting a S6 or S6 Edge is totally fine as well. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. To see if the iPhone 6 Plus is still worth it in 2022, click the video on the left. To see if the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge is still worth it in 2022, click the video on the right. If you guys have any other questions, leave it down in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, it means so much to me. But most importantly, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.